Yes. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You hearing that? Because I'm not hearing it in the room. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mic check. 1,
Testing.
2, 3,
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Not hearing it in the room. Are you hearing it in the room? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You got, okay, good.
Testing. Testing. Is that on?
Without.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Oh, that's fair. Pump the volume back up.
Oh.
Okay. Okay.
Mike?
Testing. Testing, testing. No, they're not.
The lighting?
Because that doesn't strike you as the urgency. Hey, in a year's time, we'll get back.
No, they like that answer.
No, I think they did. No,
Yeah, that was.
no, yeah.
And I mean,
Testing.
Well, it doesn't mean you don't do anything. Well, it started, so, yeah. They didn't, walk over. What's that?
Who needs to do that?
They're plugged in, they're not.
some of those that TSA would have caught.
Testing.
That's it.
It's a nuance. Again, it's not. But he points out a reality. You deal with it all back to. I mean, again, it's easy to criticize. That's why you do Myers. Easy to criticize.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You want one on 3 also?
How are you?
Good.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Let's see.
Hey, how you doing? Good.
All right. Hey, welcome to the job. One thing to think
So, how, if I got this money, because again, I think the key is just to get the house.
Right.
And you
He's
can
definitely been around.
So,
Right. For sure. Yeah, we could definitely, in fact, what we would do is we would deploy to I mean, actually, yep. And we do typically great. Okay. I think for I think my opinion is we have to qualify. Anyway, it is what it is. And, you know,
what about that's
a lot of money in that. I mean, just saying from the, from the hold the purse or less. But they haven't gotten it. But that, in my mind, that helps.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's accountability and all that.
So one of the questions the staff was asking.
but then
So, one of the things I didn't say
and that's required.
Even though they've all had, it's more than 60 days.
we require a certain percentage of
And this would be.
So what we do is once the seat side network
We talked about it. There's a shy, but this, we have data that would show that, yes. Who asked that?
Yeah, I think that one is repeat.
Which one's?
Because that's a big concern.
Yeah, the big guy. It's like, yeah, let's, we can definitely talk.
Yes. I mean, they're like, do whatever you can, drive it.
They swear to say that we can do it, we don't have the authority to do it.
In terms of
Secretary does. Well, actually, it's like a second time, it's just a sign off on her.
It's a lot.
well, yeah, it's a lot, and we know them.
So we can, that's gotta be, I mean, they can be hard, they can be really against
This one for
Right.
Yeah, like,
Testing, testing.
you're just trying to answer a question.
good. Well, then let's work on that. We'll probably send a letter to the secretary. I'd like to start with Carter. And I do think you had a point in this stuff. Because I think when you said 2019, they kind of got
Yeah, it was fiscal results. So I should have said, so the only thing we need is fund.
That kind of ruffles some.
Yeah. I know. That was why I said to Mr. Kecko, I said, yeah, it is 2 years, 17, 19, but actually we're already in 18. It's not getting 19, so, yeah.
Welcome to the job.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
It's part of it.
Yep.
But you don't have to, unlike some of the other components, I mean, we have primary jurisdiction. So I think you don't have to.
Right. That's right. Yes, sir. Right.
I just think that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, we have Clint Fisher.
The Secretary of State
Yeah, no. Right. Yeah, for sure. And it dilutes the focus to it. She's spread.
All right.
All right.
Very good. Thank you. They're just getting the mics up.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Systems reviewing right now.
Okay.
Just give it a few minutes.
Okay.
We're gonna start after the set. It's just after we close to open.
Okay.
Get that power up again.
Oh, got it.
And now it's running through all the small checks.
Okay.
Once I know that it's working, I'll come back and make sure this is
Okay.
off. So it's on now. It's
Okay.
not picking up.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
If suddenly you hear something, feel free to
Or just stop talking.
What's one of those things we need to make sure that
Okay.
Thank you.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
Committee on Homeland Security will come to order. The committee is meeting today to hear from the Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration, David Pekoske, on his plans for leading a workforce of approximately 60,000 employees, the security operations at nearly 450 airports throughout the United States, the Federal Air Marshal Service, and shared security for highways, railroads, ports, mass transit systems, and pipelines. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, our committee is meeting to discuss TSA's role in keeping our transportation system secure. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome and thank Administrator David Pekoske for joining us this morning to discuss a range of important topics relevant to America's aviation security. We, and I say we, the committee, have just been briefed in a classified setting by the DHS Inspector General and the Administrator about specific vulnerabilities to our aviation security. And quite frankly, I think I speak for all of us when I say that we found that briefing disturbing. We need to do more to confront the growing threats aimed at the aviation sector. And I want to work with you so we can remedy this situation as soon as possible, given the threat level. And I'm hopeful that TSA is successful with implementing the 8 recommendations that should improve screening checkpoint operational effectiveness. While all members on this committee share my concerns, I do want to remind the members that the information shared and exchanged in that briefing must remain classified. Today, we are 16 years past the horrendous 9/11 attacks that claimed the lives of almost 3,000 people. However, we are only 9 days past the latest terror attack to hit downtown New York. And while the latest attack was carried out with a truck instead of an airplane, it was a reminder that the threats we face are still real. Before he was killed, ISIS leader Sheikh Adnani called for lone wolf attacks, begging followers to kill the kuffar in his backyard by any means necessary. Today, international terrorists are still determined to spread fear by killing innocent people and destroying our way of life. And though many live on other continents, they're only one flight away. If we are going to be successful in keeping our homeland safe, we must make sure that TSA has the tools and resources it needs to carry out its mission. We understand, however, this is no easy task. Even though there are approximately 60,000 TSA employees helping safeguard nearly 450 airports throughout the United States, our aviation sector remains the crown jewel of terrorist targets. America's enemies only have to be right once, while we have to be right 100%. With millions of people traveling into our country from all over the world, we must expeditiously implement policies and procedures that instill confidence and make our transportation system safe and secure. Fortunately, our committee has been dedicated to working together with TSA and other components within DHS to get the job done. Over the last several years, we have helped strengthen our aviation security with the legislation from this committee that was signed into law. This legislation included bills that enhanced security at last point of departure airports into the United States and require emergency response and active shooter exercises for TSA personnel on a regular basis. We also passed legislation that directs the TSA Administrator to develop and update a strategic 5-year technology investment plan to report and provide to the private sector with a realistic roadmap of the agency's technology needs. These are certainly steps in the right direction, but as we saw from our previous briefing, we have a lot more to do. And in 2015, we also learned through leaked reports from the DHS Inspector General that TSA's passenger screening record was, in their words, abysmal. This was very discouraging to this committee and very dangerous to the American people. And even though some changes have been made to correct this problem, we cannot be satisfied until we know it's been properly addressed. But the government cannot solve this problem alone. Working with the private sector, we need to find ways to meet our security needs. These partnerships can produce new and innovative technologies that can advance our screening process, including the use of biometrics like fingerprints and facial recognition. This will make it hard to slip past screeners at the airport. New technology will also strengthen our ability to keep up with emerging threats. And I think, as we discussed previously, the CAT scan, the CT technology is really going to be key here in protecting the traveling, not only the traveling Americans, but Americans who could be the victim of an airplane being blown up in the skies. Taking down airplanes is a constant goal of the terrorists, but how they go about trying is always changing. In late July of this year, counterterrorism officials in Australia thwarted an attack and seized material that could have been used as an improvised explosive device to blow up an airplane. We are also seeing reports that terrorists are looking for ways to use laptops and other electronic devices as bombs that will be detonated on airlines. This is a serious threat, if not the most serious threat that we face from the radical Islamists. It's a threat that must be addressed, and I look forward to discussing with you, sir, the ways in which we can confront these issues head on. Now, with that, the chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to begin my expressing condolences to the family and friends of those who lost their lives in the heinous terrorist attack in New York City last week, and thank the brave first responders who came to the aid of the injured. Our thoughts and prayers are with them all. I also want to express my condolences to the loved ones of those killed in Sunday's horrific shootings at the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs, Texas. Yet another American community has been devastated by a mass shooting, once again at a place of worship. This week, I sent Chairman McCall a letter asking to move my legislation, H.R. 1486, the Securing American Nonprofit Organizations Against Terrorism Act of 2017, as a standalone bill. H.R. 1486 establishes a program to authorize grants to nonprofit organizations, including faith-based communities, to assist them with acquisition or installation of security equipment and training related to preventing and protecting against attacks. I appreciate the Chairman's prior cooperation on this issue and hope H.R. 1486 will be considered at the next scheduled markup to expedite consideration of this important legislation in the Senate. I'd be remiss if I did not follow up on a letter I sent the Chairman last week, urging him to reschedule without further delay the abruptly postponed full committee hearing to examine the Federal Emergency Management Agency's disaster preparedness and response activities originally scheduled for November 1st. Our fellow Americans in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands are counting on us to ensure the federal government provides desperately needed emergency relief to their devastated communities, as it has for those affected by recent hurricanes in Florida and Texas. I look forward to the committees holding this important hearing without further delay. Focusing on the issue at hand, I thank the Chairman for holding today's hearing and welcome Administrator Pekoske to the committee. Mr. Administrator, we appreciate the task you have to secure the nation's transportation system. The fact that the department considered banning devices larger than a smartphone from all U.S.-bound passenger planes earlier this year reflects the seriousness of the threats to aviation today. Indeed, while the September 11th attacks were 16 years ago, new and more dangerous threats are constantly emerging. To address these threats, the Trump administration must invest in aviation security to strengthen TSA's effectiveness. Instead, the administration appears hell-bent on squandering billions on a boondoggle border wall that will do nothing to make the nation more secure. Meanwhile, $1.28 billion in aviation security fees are diverted from TSA operations annually, ostensibly to fund deficit reduction. That $1.28 billion that's being collected could go a long ways toward helping us secure our aviation vulnerabilities. At the same time, House Republicans are currently pushing a tax package that would add at least $1.5 trillion to the deficit while helping the wealthy and well-connected and leaving the middle class to pick up the tab. It simply defies common sense. In addition to providing the financial resources necessary for the agency to do its job effectively, TSA must address the workforce challenges that have plagued it since its creation. TSA has consistently struggled with low morale across the workforce, ranking 303 out of 305 government agencies in 2016. Low morale has a nexus to the high turnover rate within the ranks of TSOs. TSOs represent 70% of the TSA workforce, yet have been denied full collective bargaining rights, whistleblower protection, and opportunities to effectively raise issues in dispute to an independent third party, such as the Merit Systems Protection Board. Additionally, TSOs are subject to a pay and performance system that does not track with the General Services wage system, the primary wage system for federal workers. In order to move the workforce forward and see necessary changes in vision, it is imperative for TSA frontline personnel to receive these critical protections. Democrats stand ready to work with you, Mr. Administrator, to ensure that TSA has the resources necessary to effectively train and maintain the workforce it needs to carry out its vital mission. Again, I thank the Chairman for holding this hearing and the Administrator for joining us today. I look forward to a productive hearing and close oversight of TSA going forward. I yield back.
Thank the ranking member. Other members are reminded opening statements may be submitted for the record. On August 10th, 2017, retired Vice Admiral David Pekoske was sworn in as the 7th TSA Administrator after serving over 30 years in the United States Coast Guard. I want to thank you for your service, sir, and thank you for being here today to offer testimony. Your full statement will appear in the record. The Chair now recognizes Administrator Pekoske.
Good morning, Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the committee. I begin my remarks by reflecting on the tragic events in New York City last weekend and Sutherland Springs, Texas, this past Sunday, and join both of you in offering my condolences to the families of the victims and our thoughts and prayers to all those who are injured. Sir, thank you for inviting me here today to testify about transportation security for my first time in the role as Administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. My colleagues and I at TSA appreciate the support the committee and its members have provided to TSA in the passage of H.R. 2825, the Department of Homeland Security Authorization Act of 2017. And we are grateful for the longstanding and constructive relationship that TSA enjoys with the committee. I look forward to building on this relationship during my tenure at the helm of TSA. I am honored by the opportunity to serve as the TSA Administrator. Although I've only been on the job for a short time, I am impressed with the dedication and commitment of the men and women of TSA, who provide protection to millions of people every single day, 365 days a year. TSA's mission to protect America's transportation systems is vital to our nation's security. Aviation security has come a long way in 16 years, but we still face a determined adversary. The current threat environment is complex, diverse, and persistent. The threat to international aviation is high, and multiple terrorist groups remain intent on attacking our surface transportation systems. We must adapt to these evolving challenges. Successfully meeting them rests on our own evolution, both in TSA and globally. We must raise the security baseline by staying ahead of threats and quickly deploying effective countermeasures, and working closely with our industry, public safety, and international partners. We must innovate so we can detect more complex threats and prohibited items ever more quickly, consistently, and efficiently. We must ensure that our workforce receives the best training and leadership available and is closely connected to the TSA mission. To raise the baseline of international aviation security, TSA is working closely with partners across the globe. In June, TSA enhanced security measures for all commercial flights to the United States, and then in September initiated new security measures to address threats to cargo aircraft flying to the United States. We are grateful to our many partners in industry and the public sector at home and overseas for their support of these efforts over the past several months. TSA's aggressive pursuit of innovation includes exploring the use of computed tomography systems at airport checkpoints. These systems feature improved 3D imaging and enhanced detection capabilities. As important as these technological advancements are, our TSA security professionals are vital in accomplishing the mission, from those that work behind the scenes and out of public view, to those at our airport security checkpoints, onboard aircraft, and in our partnership with our surface transportation system owners and operators. To carry out our activities effectively, we need to invest in our workforce, especially in key areas such as training and communications. I communicate to employees every chance I have the message that they are valued and that their work is critically important, and that their #1 priority is security effectiveness. The recent terror attacks in New York City and Sutherland Springs, Texas, and overseas are a compelling reminder of the need to remain vigilant in all modes of transportation. We need to continue building on our surface transportation security successes through stakeholder communications, coordination, and collaboration to protect these open-by-nature systems. I have received input from key stakeholders in all surface modes regarding their views on how TSA can help them improve security. Mr. Chairman, I value and appreciate the oversight provided by this committee, by the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General, and by the General Accountability Office. And I pledge during my tenure as Administrator to be open, transparent, and responsive to every member of this committee. My key priority is improving job satisfaction that will equate to improved security performance and efficiency. And I appreciate and will build upon the already outstanding relationships that TSA has with our airport, airline, and surface transportation system owners and operators, with our public safety partners throughout the United States and internationally, and certainly with our international organizations and partners. So this concludes my statement. I am honored to serve in this capacity, and I very much look forward to your questions today.
Thank you. I appreciate that testimony. I go back to Ramzi Youssef, 93 World Trade Center bomber, Pajoinka plot to blow up 12 airlines simultaneously. He escapes, talked to his uncle, who basically plotted the 9/11 attacks. And they have still not stopped. They are relentless in bringing down airline. Even though they've been demoralized in Iraq and Syria to a large extent, and they've called for attacks by vehicles and knives and by whatever means necessary, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's dream is still alive and well, unfortunately. And it's gone from AQAP to ISIS. And we've had our threat briefings, and we know that they're still trying to bring down airlines through turning a laptop into an explosive device. We just had a briefing from the Inspector General that I'm not allowed to go into detail, but he did publicly state he identified vulnerabilities in covert testing. Vulnerabilities I think every member at the briefing found disturbing. I believe there are things we can start doing today and not waiting. I don't think the American people can afford to wait for the safety of Americans. You and I talked about computed tomography, or CT. I've seen this technology. It goes from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. You can rotate, and it also highlights and identifies contraband and explosive devices. We have this as a pilot program in only 2 airports. And my question to you is, how soon can this technology be deployed to all airports in the United States? And also, importantly, the last 10 point-of-departure airports identified as the highest threat airports.
Yes, sir. Computed tomography X-ray systems are a significant enhancement over what TSA currently uses at the checkpoints. You're correct in that we're prototyping 2 systems in the United States right now because it is a system that we're prototyping. It's the conveyor belt that brings the carry-on bags to the machine and the machine process itself, and plus the interface with our transportation security officers. Sir, hypothetically, we could deploy that technology throughout the system now because the technology exists. But what would happen as a result of that would be an improvement in the operator's ability to see images, because as you mentioned, it is 3D and it has a lot more fidelity for the operator. So I think the operator's success in identifying substances to look for further inspection would be greatly improved. However, we aren't at the point yet where we can get the throughput through the computer tomography machines that we currently have through the existing machines. But over the course of the next several months, we'll be relatively close to that. And so, the technology does exist. It is being tested to a degree in Europe, and it could be deployed really because those machines are already being made. I would also add that this technology, computer tomography, is already in place in our check bag systems. And so
I think that's what is a little bit confusing to us. Is it's already being used for check bags. It's being used in 2 airports. And I understand the algorithm would have to be updated at some point in time, software associated with that. But it seems to me, given the high threat level that we are in right now with aviation, and that is our crown jewel, why can't we move as quickly as possible to deploy CT technology to all airports in the United States and those 10 last point of departure airports, and then upgrade the software when that becomes available?
Yes, sir, we could do that. The reason the CT technology is in the check bag area and not in the checkpoints just yet is because it's only been recently that we've been able to get the weight and the size of those machines down to the point where they could fit in a checkpoint. But now we have those 2 prototypes in Phoenix and Boston, and we know that capability for sizing exists. And you're correct, sir. We do need to do some work on the algorithms, which would increase the range of the substances the machines are able to detect, and also lower the weights that they will be able to detect that as well. That algorithm development can occur after the machines are deployed. Right now, our plan is to do the algorithm development first and the deployment of the machine second.
Well, why can't we do it the other way around? Deploy the machines and update the algorithm later.
You could do that, sir. The only challenge to that would be the reduced throughput through the machines and the integration with the conveyor belt that brings the carry-on bags and the bins to the machine.
Well, I look forward to working very closely with you. I see this as perhaps the biggest threat that we face from the radical Islamists. When you talk about large-scale attacks. And so I look forward to working with you to see how rapidly we can deploy this new technology. And in addition, working with the appropriators to make sure that the monies are available and reprogrammed as well to get this technology out to these airports and also these last point of departure airports that members and I have gone to on many occasions. And quite frankly, the level of security is a bit frightening at some of those airports in the high threat areas as well. And so I know, welcome to the job. I know you understand the threats very well, and I look forward to working with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And I would add that the computer tomography, the CT capability, would be a significant improvement in our detection capability at the checkpoint, probably the most significant improvement we could make in that location. Additionally, sir, in our efforts to raise the global bar of aviation security, there is a path to get to CT deployment at last points of departure airports in the future.
That's very good. Thank you. Chair recognizes the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think in line with what you've just said, there's an ongoing interest that this committee has had about how long it takes to get new technology deployed. And it just continues to be a problem. Sometimes we're told it's acquisition, sometimes we're told it's testing of the equipment, but it just never happens. And as Mr. Katko mentioned in an earlier briefing, there are other airports around the world who already put new technology in place. Sometimes it might just makes sense to go to the airport and see what they're doing rather than always wanting our thing. And I'm saying this to say that if we know vulnerabilities exist and new technology is somewhere being deployed, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't pursue that. To that question, we were told a few years ago that we're spending somewhere around $9 per passenger at airports on security per passenger. Do you have an idea what we're spending on trains or buses or cruise lines per passenger?
No, sir, I don't. And of course, in the airport, we provide the security at the onboard cruise lines and in mass transit systems. The security is provided by the owners and operators. We issue guidelines and guidance in that regard.
So we have nothing to do with security for trains?
Oh, we do, sir. We have responsibility for security, but the way it works is the owners and operators are the ones that actually provide the security, unlike in an airport where TSA actually provides the security. What we do in the surface transportation modes is we provide guidelines for what those surface transportation modes should do for security. Those are cooperatively developed, and they're actually quite good.
So you're saying we have nothing to do with it other than provide the guidelines? We don't provide oversight to see what they're doing or anything like that?
Yes, sir. We do provide oversight of the guidelines that we jointly develop with them, and we have regular dialogue with our surface transportation operators.
So when someone is not meeting the standard, what do you do?
We go back to them, have a discussion of where the standard shortfall is, and our experience with the surface transportation modes almost universally is that they're very quick to remedy the observations that we make.
So how do you rank surface transportation systems? Pass, fail, marginal, or what?
From my perspective, and I was just up in New York City and New Jersey visiting the surface transportation systems last week, I would mark them as pass at this point. There is a pretty significant security effort.
I'm trying to get to how do you mark it? I mean, does Amtrak provide you with something and they in turn, you review it and say it's okay, or how do you do that?
The way we do it, sir, is we collaboratively develop guidelines as to how we would provide security, and that's a very beneficial process because the surface transportation owner-operator has a perspective. We talk about the security outcomes that we'd like to achieve, and they come back with, okay, we understand that outcome. Here's how we think, as the operators of the system, we can best achieve it, and then we agree on a way forward.
All right, if you have any written reviews of passenger rail systems in this country, can you provide that information to the committee?
Yes, sir.
Next thing, are you aware that there are airports in this country who invested monies in modifying their airports pursuant to TSA's direction to accommodate equipment that have not been reimbursed over 10 years later?
Yes, sir. I believe those are the inline baggage systems that some airports many years back put in place, and their understanding was that they would be reimbursed for that expense. They have submitted a claim for that amount. We have reviewed those claims, and now those claims, once they completed our review, are back with those airports. I think 14 out of 19 that we agreed were appropriate for review, and they're back to those airports for their comments on what we adjusted, if anything, on their submission. The challenge is having the funding to be able to pay for that investment that they've already made.
So they have made, at TSA's direction, the improvement, spent local taxpayers' money, and over 10 years later, we still back and forth trying to get those airports their money?
Yes, sir, that's my understanding.
Well, can you provide us the status of those, you said 19 airports?
Yes, sir, I think 14 of the 19, there were 19 total, 14 of them actually submitted or we approved.
Can you provide that,
yes, sir,
that to us? The last item, Mr. Chairman, in 2007, Congress passed a bill I authored implementing recommendations of the 9/11 Act, and the law required TSA to publish regulations requiring transit systems to provide frontline workers with security training and develop and implement security plans. Over a decade after that bill was enacted, TSA has yet to issue these regulations. You have any idea why they haven't done it?
Yes, sir. I recognize it's been a very long time, and as I understand it, there is a requirement for training, for vetting, and for the security plans. 2 of those 3 are well in the process. One's in the Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, and the other is in the Advanced Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. The third is queued up beyond fiscal 19, so sometime beyond fiscal 19.
Fiscal 19,
yes,
12 years after Congress passed the law.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, and Mr. Chairman, I think that's in line with how we do the technology and some other things. We just somehow, and I know you inherited a lot of this, but at some point, some of this should be done in a more timely manner. And I would encourage you, Mr. Administrator, to get a sense of how many of these issues are outstanding and how do we bring closure to them. Otherwise, our public will continue to lack the confidence necessary in the systems that they use to go back and forth in this country. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Administrator. You got a real challenge ahead of you. This agency that you run is broken badly, and it needs your attention. I want to ask you about the fast tracking of passengers in airports. You know, we've got the pre-check brand, which we've been working real hard. TSA has been working real hard to make people aware of that they can do this upfront screening and pay a one-time fee and get into a faster lane, expedited lane. And it's good. It's a win-win for everybody. But as you know, there's been a practice of fast tracking when the lines are delayed in the normal checkpoints. They'll pull a group of people out and put them into the pre-check line randomly. And frankly, it's confusing people who are in the pre-check line. What can you tell us that you can do to make sure we maintain the brand for pre-check that makes people want to participate in it?
Yes, sir. And our goal is to increase the enrollment in pre-check, and I understand why that activity would be a disincentive in a way for people to pay the fee and enroll in pre-check. We no longer move people randomly from the standard lane into pre-check. That was done in the past. That's not done any longer. What we do, though, sir, is if there's a canine in the checkpoint and the canine sweeps a series of passengers without a reaction, then we feel we've done some vetting through the canine, and we move those passengers into pre-check. It's a way to manage lane throughput.
Okay. Secondly, you and I talked in my office a week or so ago about the need for a national consortium of explosive detection canines, breeding and training experts. And I've got a bill put together that I plan to introduce next week that will have TSA experts along with university researchers, private sector trainers, work to create a scientifically validated standard for explosive detection canines. And I want to ask your commitment to work with me with the sense of urgency this issue deserves to advance that legislation.
Yes, sir. You have my commitment. I'm a strong supporter of canine programs. I think they provide a tremendous capability for security, and I strongly support what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin. Not here. Chair recognizes Mr. Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Admiral, for your service. I want to get back to the CT technology, the 3D technology. You said hypothetically that could be done, but you're looking at the throughput now. There's prototypes out there, and other countries are using them. So when you're saying hypothetically you could do that now, are you saying that the technology doesn't exist, even though it's being utilized elsewhere, or not?
No, sir. The technology most certainly exists, and in fact, I'm going out and we'll visit Schiphol Airport next week just to see what they have in place.
I could interrupt just because of time. I apologize. So what did you mean hypothetically then? So, okay, we've eliminated it's hypothetical, that it's not hypothetical because of technology. So why is it hypothetical?
Hypothetical due to funding.
Oh, that's interesting. So you could use more funding to keep people safer.
So to invest in the CT technology requires funding above what TSA currently has.
That's right. Well, that's a great point because there are other options for that funding. I mean, the public, I don't know if they're aware, they're surcharged a certain amount of money, and $1.28 billion of that has been pulled back from what the public gives for deficit reduction. We'll talk about that later, but at a different venue. But you could use $1.28 billion. Now, would that really help you in terms of getting rid of the hypothetical because of funding?
Yes, sir. We compete for funding like every other agency does within the Department of Homeland Security and within the federal government.
Could you use the money? Would that really? How far would that go? That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, and it will go a long way, sir.
You think so? We could be safer, clearly because of technology, safer in your opinion, but we're not doing it because of money. But we're taking away the passenger-funded money, and also the president's budget decreases money. Are you satisfied with your budget?
Sir, I support the president's budget, but certainly I wouldn't disagree with the fact that additional money makes us.
Well, you support it, but are you satisfied that it keeps us safe given the technology that's practically available to us right now?
Sir, I was not involved when that budget was developed, so I don't know what the trade-offs were.
I'm just asking your opinion. Yeah. I'm not blaming you for the budget.
No, and I'm not trying.
You're satisfied we're safer with that budget when you just said that that money being taken away from the passenger portion of this and the budget itself could make us safer because of the 3D scanning? Sir, that's not satisfactory to me. Is it satisfactory to you?
So when that budget was developed, we weren't on the path of CT development at the checkpoint either. So that wasn't a program that was reviewed for investment when that budget was developed.
So it's the sequence.
This is the
now we're there though, right? So would you favor taking that money back? I mean, we have the funds available. We're talking about $10 billion plus for a wall. I mean, we have the money. So you're telling me that we're not safe, Americans aren't safe, we have technology available to make them much safer, but it's money that's keeping us, not the technology itself. I'm clear on that?
Sir, I don't believe I said that Americans weren't safe.
Safer.
Safer, yes, sir. Certainly additional investment would make travelers, whether they're Americans or people visiting our country, safer.
Is the VIPA program a good program?
Yes, sir.
Why is it being cut, 31 teams to 8?
Again, it's a trade-off with other priorities.
But that was available. You just said when they did the budget and other things, well, it wasn't in sequence. But this was already there, so we knew about it. So that's being cut, and that includes K-9, patrol, and those teams. So that keeps us safer, but we're not funding that either.
Yes, sir. But Vipers. When you look at the overall budget, here's a question to think about: is can you use that funding to provide more transportation security officers at a checkpoint versus a Viper team? And those are the kinds of trade-offs that are made all the time.
Well, I'd suggest this, and it's not in your purview. I think there's a trade-off with a wall. We know, and we can't get into it, what was discussed before at a classified hearing. But we know, I would call it a present danger, and that's not talking about anything that's not classified. So we have a present danger right now. We have the technology and the resources to do it, but we're not doing it because of funding, because we're taking it away for budget reduction on what people pay themselves out of their own pocket to do it, and we're paying for a wall. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Barletta from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today. For years, I've called on Congress and the Obama administration to complete a biometric entry-exit screening system, which the 9/11 Commission report called an essential investment in our security. Tracking the arrival and departure of foreign visitors to the United States is a critical part of our national security and immigration control. Without this information, it is impossible to know whether foreign visitors have left the country or if they've overstayed their visa. Using only biographic information, such as names or passport numbers, is not enough because it does not prove without a doubt that the person leaving is the same person who entered. An automated entry and exit screening system for foreign nationals entering and departing the United States has been required for years and has been ignored to be implemented. I'm pleased we now have a president who whose utmost priority is ensuring the safety of the American people. President Trump has clearly laid out a series of essential border and national security priorities that include the speedy completion of a biometric entry-exit tracking system for all travelers to the United States. Although entry-exit policy and operations are primarily under the jurisdiction of U.S. Customs and Border Protection, TSA is an important entity in protecting the United States. With that, how is TSA working with CBP to utilize biometric technology to enhance national security?
Yes, sir. Our desire is also to use biometrics as a passenger is approaching the checkpoint. The first stop right now is you provide your passport or your driver's license, and that's checked by the officer. What we would like to eventually get to is also a biometric. And our desire is to have the same biometric that U.S. Customs and Border Protection uses. We coordinate with them extensively on this. We've already tested out some biometric technology in our checkpoints. Those tests are under evaluation right now, but that is the technology we're very interested in.
And how is TSA working to ensure information is properly shared between the agencies?
Yes, sir. We meet with TSA, with Customs and Border Protection on a regular basis. We have a very strong relationship with them. We're both in the same airports, and I'm confident that we'll find a way to share that information securely. Thank you.
Second question. For decades, the Castro regime has ruled with an iron fist over the nation of Cuba. I believe the concessions should not be made until the Castro dictatorship gives their people the basic freedoms that we as Americans take for granted every day. Under the Obama administration, commercial flight travel between the United States and Cuba resumed. However, we are still largely unaware of the day-to-day operations of Cuban airports, including employee screening and training and overall airport security. The fact that the Cuban government controls the vetting and hiring of many airport employees is a significant vulnerability. Can you please tell me what steps are being taken by TSA to address the security risks at Cuban airports and on commercial flights between the United States and Cuba?
Yes, sir. In our effort to raise the bar on global aviation security, there are a series of measures. Some of them have already been implemented. Were implemented in July, and others began to be implemented on October 26th. TSA inspectors have done a tremendous job in visiting all 280 last points of departure airports to ensure the July measures were implemented according to our guidance, and found that all countries complied, including Cuba. While they were in Cuba checking for the July compliance, they also checked for the October 26th compliance, and Cuba is one of the first countries to actually come in full compliance with the October 26th measures. So on a basis of overall global standards and our inspection of their efforts to get there and achieve those standards, we found them compliant with both measures.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. You have a tough job.
Thank you, sir.
Chair recognizes Ms. Watson-Coleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, I live in New Jersey, and I am very concerned about the threat to surface transportation systems such as mass transit and passenger rail. We've witnessed recent attacks in other places against these systems, and we also know that Al-Qaeda has tried to instruct people on how to attack these kinds of places. We talk a lot about aviation security and all that's being done, but I need to talk to you a little bit and ask you some questions about surface transportation.
Yes, ma'am.
Does the TSA have the authorities that it needs to ensure that our nation's surface transportation systems will be secure?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We have the authority to regulate, and we also have the authority to issue security directives for our surface transportation systems.
Do you have the capacity to do the things that you have the authority to do?
Ma'am, that's an area that I am looking at very closely. As you know, I spent some time up in the New York, New Jersey area just last week, and I've also met with other owners and operators of other surface transportation systems. It's an area of focus for me, and I want to ensure that we're properly resourced for it.
Mm-hmm. It's an issue that is very important to me and the neck of the woods that I come from, and I am planning to have a field hearing to discuss this, and would love to be able to discuss this even with you there. I'd like to now ask you, talk to you a little bit about sort of the morale and, you know, the placement of TSA and sort of the network of good morale, bad morale. It has been traditionally a low, and I was just wondering, what is your plan to address this low morale issue?
Ma'am, you're correct that morale is not anywhere near where we would want it to be. But in the most recent Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, our overall numbers went up by several points. So the trend line, for the first time in many years, is now positive. I want to spend a good amount of time understanding this morale issue, but I can share with you some things that we've already put in place or are planning to put in place very shortly. One is investing in the leadership of our transportation security officers on the front line. In fairness to them, I think it's important that we provide them the skills when they come into leadership positions so they can properly take care of the folks that are now in their charge at the security checkpoint, one of the most critical areas for security for us in our entire system. Additionally, I think it's very important that we invest in training our transportation security officer cadre to be expert at the jobs that they're asked to do, which are, as you said, very difficult jobs under a lot of pressure. My impression, as I've gone to many airports since my time as the administrator, is that our people are doing an excellent job. They're very dedicated to the mission. It's our job as an agency to properly provide them the training that they need to perform and the support they need to be successful. Employee morale is an incredibly high priority issue for me, and I would submit that as morale improves, security effectiveness improves at the same time, and attrition declines.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. And it's our job to see that you have the resources that you need to make sure that as many security procedures and needs are being met to keep us all very, very safe. And for that reason, I also support not draining the aviation fees back into the general fund, when indeed you have such a tremendous need and it's such an obvious need, and we have a responsibility. I also am very interested in you as a new administrator there, your willingness to commit to reviewing all the policies and procedures that lead to pathways to more secure jobs, higher level jobs. I have tremendous respect for your frontline employees. I encounter them every time I am flying. They are courteous, and I have found them to be thorough. And my husband, who carries a bag that's stuffed with everything from his childhood to this time in his life, often gets taken aside and going through that bag. And, and I appreciate that, because I recognize that that is a measure of double checking. And even though he looks real innocent, and he's a little older and all, can't be a problem to anybody, your people are very conscientious in doing that. But having said that, there are policies and procedures that may impede successful retention as well as upward mobility for your employees, and I'm wondering if you will commit to having a serious review of those.
Yes, ma'am, I absolutely commit to that, and I appreciate your comments about the TSA workforce. That's been my experience as well, and I really genuinely appreciate the hard work that they have and the good job that they do. One of the things that we're working on, and we should have out in a very short period of time, because I do want to shorten the cycle times for TSA decisions, is a career path for our frontline officers and required gates of training, both resident and non-resident, that will be provided to them as they go to the next level in the organization as a prerequisite for promotion. And so, I want to place a great deal of emphasis, and I would be very happy to have a further discussion with you on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Katko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I was waiting my turn here to talk to you, I was looking at the online, and I noticed about 8 minutes ago that the Trump administration reversed some of President Obama's policies with respect to Cuba. Were you aware of any of that was coming down the pike?
No, sir.
Okay, well, apparently it's going to scale back tremendously travel, so if you have an opportunity to digest the order, I would appreciate you getting back to us on what that means for travel and security within Cuba.
Okay.
Thank you. As I may have mentioned in a previous setting, I got back from a congressional delegation not too long ago. We went to Western Europe and to Jordan to look at airports and airport security, among other things. And one of the things we heard from people in Germany and in Amsterdam and as well as in Jordan is that security officials routinely think that many airports that technically meet ICAO standards are actually not living up to those standards, or they're not adhering to the standards, even though they're technically been ICAO approved. Have you heard that before?
I have not heard that before. I was up at ICAO in Montreal back in September, and can attest that the ICAO standards are actually good standards. What I said in my keynote address is that we need to, as a global community, press to implement these standards consistently across the globe, and with a sense of urgency.
How do we do that?
Well, primarily from my perspective, we have what's called a Quad 4 within the ICAO. That's the United States, the European Commission, Canada, and Australia. And amongst the Quad 4 countries, we are completely aligned to aggressively implement the ICAO standards, and we represent most of the air traffic in the world. And so we'll continue to press that with our Quad 4 partners in leadership with ICAO. I would also say, sir, that I had the opportunity to sit down with the Secretary General of ICAO while I was there, and ICAO is greatly improving the priority of security within their organization. As you know, it was originally a safety organization, now has a significant security responsibility. And so I was actually very heartened by the ICAO staff's commitment to keep on pursuing security and being aggressive about it.
Well, you sound far more positive about it than your European counterparts do. So there's a disconnect somewhere, and I'd ask you just look into this matter further with your European counterparts, because they are absolutely expressing concerns about many countries, especially countries that fly into their airports, that may not be adhering to the minimum ICAO standards. And my take on ICAO is that it is a minimum standard thing, and some of the airports that meet ICAO standards to me are shocking. So I don't necessarily agree with you that the ICAO standards are robust for a lot of airports. You see a lot of airports like in the Caribbean and in the Middle East that technically may be meeting ICAO standards that it's jaw-dropping.
Sure. Well, I'm going to spend a good part of a day with my European Commission counterpart on that trip to Europe, so I'll have that discussion with him. And the other thing we saw when we went to Europe, too, is something that, and I think this is correct, that all the European Union airports now mandate 100% employee screening. And even in the country of Jordan, they mandate a 100% screening. We saw it firsthand, and it's quite robust. And we saw it at Schiphol Airport as well. And there's separate entrances. It doesn't seem to be a huge burden for them to maybe any time to enter into a secure area to go through a checkpoint. But you have the differences in the U.S. is amazing. And to me, I want to know your opinion, whether is it that much more difficult in the United States to have 100% employee screening, because the rest of the world seems to be doing it okay. Yes, sir. I share your concern with insider threat. I think that's one of the more significant challenges facing us as an overall community. That and cargo and certainly personal electronic devices, as we've discussed earlier. And I want to get a lot more information as to what is within the art of the possible within the United States airports with respect to insider threat. There are some studies out there that say that, hey, if you randomly screen X percent, you're as effective as screening 100%, but you don't have the effect on the throughput of employees through an airport. I just want to take a look at that. I haven't had a chance to get deep into it, but I have been in the secure areas of airports and of course the sterile areas, but the secure areas on the tarmac, and it is an area that I do think we need to take another look at.
Well, the largest airport in the world, Atlanta, has gone to full employee screening. They don't seem to be missing a beat. Now, I will just remind you that since I've been in office in 2015, we've had guns being smuggled routinely on airlines from Atlanta to New York. We've had major drug trafficking cases all over the country involving insiders. We've had flight attendants carrying drugs in through the checkpoints because they're not screened. We've had, in a case in Dallas-Fort Worth, for example, we had an employee who was checking the manifest to see where the Federal Air Marshals were flying, and his wife was, and he was the ringleader for a drug trafficking ring in which he offered to bring anything on board, including bombs. So I don't subscribe to your fact that the risk-based screening is working, because in that case in Dallas-Fort Worth, they knew where the screeners were. They just simply called their counterparts and went to other entries that weren't secure. So I would respectfully ask you to respond to me within 10 days or so what your thoughts are when you have a little more time as to whether or not employee screening is something we should pursue on a more robust basis.
Will do.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to align myself with the comments of my colleague, Ms. Watson-Coleman from New Jersey. As you know, New York has one of the most extensive public transportation systems in the world, and I'm glad to hear that surface transportation is a priority for you, and I would like to join with my colleague to speak with you going forward as to what, the results of your analysis that you are presently doing.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think the other thing that you're doing well is placing a focus on the morale of the employees. It has, in the short time that I've been here, in 3 years, it is a persistent problem, regardless of who sits in your chair and who holds your position. And you can understand why. They seem to, get fewer resources, fewer accolades, fewer that-a-boys, that kind of stuff. So I'm glad to hear that you are focusing on the morale. But I think that one thing that, if you speak to employees, they would want to make sure that you have their back. And a lot of that has to do with, are you in a position, do you feel like you can tell the president or anyone in the administration that you need certain things, that policies that they are putting in place are maybe not best for the national security, domestic security of our country? And to that end, I don't know if this is something that everyone who has to go through, who's appointed, and has to go through some kind of confirmation process. Were you required to take any kind of loyalty oath to the president and or the administration?
No, ma'am, I was not required to take any loyalty oath, and I did go through a confirmation process with 2 Senate committees.
So what would you tell employees? I mean, if you are doing this analysis of surface transportation and you're looking at all the other issues that my colleagues have raised here, if something came up short, do you feel that you have the ability to say that publicly and ask for more resources from either Congress or the administration through administrative action that you may want to take?
My job is to advocate for transportation security and advocate for it strongly and advocate for our employees having the right tools and the right number of people and the right training to do their jobs. I advocate for that as the budgets are being built inside the administration. So right now we're working on the fiscal 19 budget. My job is to be their strongest advocate in that process to make sure that we get the resources that we need to do our jobs. However, I'm never going to get all of the resources that I need. I don't think any agency leader would say that's the case. There are trade-offs that are made within budget limits. And so, my job working with the Secretary is to make sure that those trade-offs, if they need to be made, are made considering the urgency of the requirements we have in TSA.
Well, I mean, your workforce is the first line of defense.
Right.
So I'm glad that you recognize that. Just final question. How long have you been in this position?
Almost 3 months.
You feel like it's a lifetime?
No.
What would you say are your 2 or 3 biggest challenges as you see them in the short time that you have been there?
Yeah, that's a great question, ma'am. I say the 2 or 3 biggest challenges. The first would be bringing more technology into the checkpoint environment. It's clear to me that needs to be done. I don't think anybody really disputes that needs to be done, and to try to do it as urgently as we can. Because if I were a transportation security officer working on the front line, I've watched them. I've been with many of them over the last several weeks. You're going to do a better job if you're more confident on the technology that's assisting you in doing that job. And plus, that reinforces that your agency and your government is willing to invest in the tools to do the job that you're being asked to do. So my focus is first on technology into the system through innovation, and the other focus is on the workforce, because as you just said, that workforce is our last line of defense in many cases. The workforce consists of the folks at the checkpoint. We have a good number of people that do a lot of vetting for passengers before they even get to the airport. We have inspectors literally around the world that inspect compliance with our regulations, and we have Federal Air Marshals that are in aircraft that secure aircraft in flight. And so, that whole system of employees, to me, I want to focus and make sure that they have the tools, the training, the support that they need. And I do that by, my goal as the administrator is to be out of D.C. as often as I'm in D.C. So at least try to hit a 50-50 balance. And I've actually exceeded that in the first couple of months because I wanted to just get out, introduce myself. Finally, whenever I do get out into the field, which is at least once a week, sometimes more, I do hold town halls with all of our employees, and I want to hear their points of view, what their concerns are, and then it's on me, once they raise a point of view or an issue, to get back to them with a resolution.
If I could just make one suggestion, your predecessor, Secretary Neffinger, had a big focus on trying to increase the morale among the workforce, and I would just ask you, and I don't know if you've spoken to him, which I think would be a great resource, but he put a focus on training, giving additional ongoing training for. I don't know if you've continued that or if you've chosen to change that training of the workforce.
No, didn't change it, actually enhanced it.
Okay.
Because he was exactly right. And what he did was he instituted a TSA Academy where all new employees went to this academy in Glencoe, Georgia, for 2 weeks of introductory training into TSA. We've absolutely continued that. And then what we've done is we've mapped out a career path for our frontline employees at the check lanes that shows the training that they'll receive from us to make them eligible for promotion to different levels within the checkpoint. And that hasn't been done in the past. It's been one of the challenges of trying to think about it and map it forward and publish it. So we intend to publish this so that our new employees and actually the folks that have been seasoned employees of TSA can look at, hey, this is my career path from an entry level to becoming a supervisor at the checkpoint, and here's both the resident and non-resident training that TSA will provide me to equip me to be ready for those positions.
That's great. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I yield back. Thank you, Mr.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, thank you for appearing before us today. Thank you for your service to our country. Sir, baggage screening technology, computed tomography, utilizes 3D imaging, and through the pre-check or the non-pre-check line, all bags are checked in this manner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in the non-pre-check line, the human being had to have to remove their shoes.
Yes, sir.
Checked in a similar manner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if a threat is detected in baggage that goes through the screening, then that bag is physically checked by a TSA operator. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in a similar manner, the human being, if some sort of a density, a threat is detected on that human, then that person is checked in a similar manner by a TSA agent, correct?
That's correct.
Patted down and wanded, et cetera.
Right.
For the pre-check passengers, are pre-check passengers required to remove their shoes?
No, they are not.
Their baggage is checked, though, in a similar manner with non-pre-check.
The baggage are checked in a similar manner. The difference, sir, is that pre-check passengers don't have to divest themselves of electronic devices. They can keep them in their bags.
Right, and a pre-check passenger goes through a metal detector, correct?
It does.
Will the metal detector detect a ceramic or composite plastic knife?
No, metal detectors are designed to detect metallic objects, so we know that they won't detect some objects.
Would a metal detector detect an all-plastic component pepper spray or mace device?
Likely not.
And I'm sure you're aware that the 9/11 hijackers used knives and mace and pepper spray to hijack their planes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, so would you agree, based on what we've just discussed, that the final line of defense regarding protecting our citizenry from in-flight hijacking threat is the Federal Air Marshal Service and the flight deck officer program? Would you concur that that's the final line of defense?
Yes, sir. But I would also say that there's a very front line to that overall posture, and that's the vetting process that gets folks into pre-check in the first place. And so our assumption, based on the vetting, thorough vetting of those passengers, is that they represent less risk.
Understood. But we've just determined that there's certainly a possibility, given the current technology that's in use right now across the country. Many millions of pre-check passengers could potentially pose a threat. You agree?
Yes, sir. There's never a 100% guarantee. That's always a
Exactly.
potential.
So the final line of defense being the Federal Air Marshal Service and the Flight Deck Officer Program. The Federal Air Marshal Service has not hired any new air marshals or supervisors since 2011. Is that correct?
No, sir. I believe they have hired in the last couple of years.
Okay. Do you know what those numbers are?
I do not.
Okay, can you provide that,
Yes,
please? I'm also advised that the Federal Air Marshal Service does not have a complete and timely data report on to the extent to which air marshals have completed their recurrent training, their annual recurrent training. Do you have data reflective of just exactly to what extent our current air marshals have maintained their training, their annual training?
My understanding, sir, is that we do track their currency with annual training, but I don't know how we collect. I don't know if there's a database per se that does that. I don't know if it's done manually or by a database.
Are you satisfied that the Federal Air Marshal Service, and as well, let us not overlook the Flight Deck Officer Program, which allows pilots and other flight crew members to take part in special Federal Air Marshal training courses in self-defense and close-range target instruction. Are you satisfied with that level of training, or would you share with the committee, please, what your plans are to beef that up?
For the FFDO, sir?
I
The Federal Flight?
would like to hear your opinion about
Yes, sir. In fact, I've been through part of the training that the FFDOs are provided, and I think that training is excellent overall. The number of people enrolled in the FFDO program, I believe, has grown over the course of time. It's a very beneficial program from my perspective for in-flight security, coupled with our Federal Air Marshals who are on, there's a reasonable possibility that they're going to be on a flight of passengers on.
Well, thank you for your attention to that matter. I believe it's urgent. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Chair now recognizes this gentleman from California, Mr. Correa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Thompson. I want to thank you both for holding this most important hearing. And Administrator Pekoske, I want to thank you also for your comments, for your testimony. Before this hearing, I just want to let you know I reached out to John Wayne Airport, which is the only international airport in Orange County, California, my hometown, my home county, I should say. And I was pleased to learn that the airport, John Wayne, enjoys a very productive relationship with TSA, and I thank you and TSA for continuing to commit to the security of our passengers in Orange County.
Sure, thank you.
I wanted to also follow up some of the comments of Ms. Rice and Ms. Watson, specifically on TSA personnel and morale. The more I learn about the job TSA is entrusted with, the more I think of them as first responders, really, as police officers, as firefighters. The job they have is a very serious one. The burden is a tremendous one, and again, failure is unacceptable. And so, I'm concerned about retention rates, morale. What is your retention rate like?
So the retention rate for full-time employees across the entire enterprise, and it varies by airport, based somewhat on cost of living, based on airport size and things like that, but average across the enterprise is about 12% for full-time employees. I agree with you. I think that...
So, excuse me, 12% stay and 88% move on? Or is it
No, 12% attrit, 12% leave
12% attrition rate, okay.
Yes, sir. Right, I'm sorry, yeah, 12% attrition. But like I said, it varies by airport.
So are there, you talked about a two-week academy training. Is that enough, given that we continue to face threats that are always evolving technologically in every other way? Do you have continuing training for these individuals so that they're up to par as to what's going on?
Yes, sir. There's continuing training provided at the airport as on-the-job training and also instructor-led training at the airport. That's coupled with the TSA Academy. Additionally, as we build out the roadmap, the career roadmap for our transportation and security officers, there are going to be other opportunities for them to go back to Glencoe, Georgia for training.
Let me interrupt you. I don't have much time. How long does the average TSA employee stay at TSA?
So I don't know that off the top of my head. I do know what the attrition rate is, but I don't know what the average is. And I've seen.
And the reason I ask is that I think that if you figure out how to get the morale up, which I believe is appreciating and having folks recognize the importance of TSA personnel, which that's a function of ongoing training and probably salary and other things. But the longer they're there, the more expert they become at recognizing things that are not normal and therefore being able to investigate. So, I'd like to work with you. This committee, I think, would like to work in making sure that your personnel are more professional so that they're looked upon and they feel like a police officer would feel, a firefighter would feel, which is, you know what, our job is an important one and we've got to take it that way. You just can't have folks showing up to work and say, here I go another 8 hours.
Right.
But rather, here I go, I've got an important job to do.
Yes, sir. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I yield the remainder of my time.
Chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Berrigan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My district is home to the Port of Los Angeles. I like to call it America's Port, and we just had a field hearing out there. I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for doing that. The Port of LA manages a high volume of traffic and features both passenger and cargo terminals. Last week, when we had the field hearing, one of the witnesses we had from the ILWU, Mr. Familetti, expressed some concerns over the TWIC program, the Transportation Worker Identification Credential program. He described it as, quote, a feel-good measure. He said it was ineffective and expensive, and he posed significant hardships on Americans who work on the waterfront. And he highlighted some problems with enrollment delays, due process concerns for employees who have to appeal a TSA interim denial. In these cases, the burden, he mentioned, falls on the workers to obtain court and police records in order to prove there's no disqualifying convictions. Is evaluating TWIC to find ways to improve the program a priority for you?
Ma'am, the TWIC program's been in place for a good number of years. In fact, I used to have a TWIC card myself, and I just recently looked at the throughput data for TWIC enrollment. And actually, TWIC enrollment proceeds relatively quickly as most of the other credentialing programs, unless there is an anomaly that needs further investigation. And so that's perhaps what you're talking about, or what somebody talked with you about. I'll go back and take a look at how long it takes to resolve some of those issues. But again, most of the burden to provide documentation to support a potential TWIC enrollee, somebody who might get a TWIC card to support their contention that they should have one, falls on them.
Yeah, I think there are greater problems with just that, the enrollment process, and maybe we can talk more about that. I know that in the 114th Congress, they enacted a bill, the Essential Transportation Worker Identification Credential Assessment Act, requiring the THS commission an outside organization to conduct a comprehensive assessment of the benefits and cost of the TWIC card. Do you know what the status of that is? And do you expect the assessment to be completed within the timeline established by the legislation, which is in March of 2018?
No, I do not know what the status of that is, but I would be happy to get back to you with that information.
Okay, if maybe we can get something in writing, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
And then I want to echo the concerns by some of my colleagues about the disturbing briefing that we had this morning. I was able to come to part of it. I had a markup this morning, and I had an experience about a month ago. I was flying home to California, and I was in an airport that was pretty empty. I don't think we saw a passenger go through TSA for about 20 minutes, and allowed me to stand there and talk to some of the TSA agents. And they said, would you take one issue to Congress? Here we are, we're the people that are tasked with, stopping explosives from going through onto a plane, which could prevent a terrorist attack. Yet the morale is low, and the pay, we haven't had an increase. And so I wanted to first just mention that because I promised the TSA agent that I ran into that I would bring this back and certainly ask about it. And I wonder if that would help what we're seeing to improve not just morale, but to make sure we're getting people in these positions who are being very thorough and making sure we're not missing any possible threatening situations from coming through the airports.
Yes, I certainly think it would help. In fact, part of the roadmap for career development has pay gates in it, and it shows when you enter what you're paid, not adjusted for COLA, because that's going to change by airport, but what the basic pay is, and then what your pay increase gates would be, because that's a common issue that I've heard as well, is that you join TSA, you're a TSO, and you haven't had a pay raise, where most other employees, whether it's private sector or government, get some kind of a longevity increase along the way. What we tried to do in this career path roadmap was to key pay raises to achievement of certain training goals. For example, when you come into TSA and you finally go off to the TSA Academy within the first 180 days of your employment, upon graduation from that academy program, you would get a pay raise. And then if you got promoted to a lead transportation security officer, somebody who is in charge of that particular check lane, you would get another pay raise, and we would map those out on a percentage basis. So somebody could see if I entered at the entry level pay, what pay hypothetically within 4 or 5 years might I be able to achieve if I got all this training and I was a very good performer. And so part of it is to kind of map out what that pay increase would be, and importantly for me is also what kind of skill development and training and leadership development that we would provide.
Great. Thank you. I yield back.
Okay, thanks.
The ranking member is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things, Mr. Administrator. Whistleblower protections. Is there a reason why we don't offer the same protection for our TSA workforce as other federal employees?
Sir, I don't know that we don't. I thought we did provide whistleblower protection. I'll go back and take a look at that. Certainly from my perspective, whistleblowers should be protected from retaliation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you would, check that out and get back to us. There's some misunderstanding of the language, and employees feel like they can't do the right thing for fear of reprisal.
Sir.
And I think it'd be very helpful.
Yes, sir, because I want them to do the right thing, period.
Absolutely. The chairman talked about CT scanners and other things in his comments, and I think everyone kind of agreed that that's the way forward in terms of new technology. And some of us have looked at the air cargo situation as one of the ways to move that, and I think there's a demonstration perhaps underway somewhere with that in light of what happened in Australia.
Yes, sir.
And you know, we're trying to pursue legislation that would move that along, and we have some ideas about it, and facts about it, I've introduced the Air Cargo Security Improvement Act of 2017, and I'd like for you to look at it and get some views back to us on whether you think CT scanning makes sense and it's the right thing, and all of that.
Yes, sir. I do know that the way you check air cargo can vary and be effective in for example, the use of canines to check pallets of air cargo. The challenge with CT technology, as I understand it, with respect to air cargo in particular, is the aperture is not large enough to get some pallets through, and so it would require a breakdown of a pallet and a rebuild of a pallet. And so we're looking at other means that cargo carriers can use to achieve the same security outcome.
Okay. Thank you. You will get back to us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so we're also working with Customs and Border Protection on their air cargo advanced screening process, and we have some emergency amendments and security directives issued with respect to air cargo and some of the procedures to use ACAS information to clear cargo coming to the United States.
Okay. Thank you. You're back.
Thank you, Admiral, for your testimony here today. Congratulations on your position and your first testimony for this committee. The ranking member and I will be sending a letter to the Secretary voicing our concerns over the Inspector General's report and addressing our path moving forward, particularly with respect to technology, to address the threats that we face. And so with that, members may have additional questions. And pursuant to the rules, the hearing will be held open for 10 days. And without objection, committee stands adjourned.